Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors meeting for the 23rd day of January 2025. We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll ask the board secretary to call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Here.
Chair Richards,
Here.
Director Camacho,
Here.
Vice Chair Miller,
Here.
Director Perea,
Here.
Director Gilmetti,
Present.
Director Escutia, Director Williams,
Here.
Director Cohen, Assemblymember Arambula, Senator Gonzalez. Chair, we have the quorum.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fresno, California. My partner here, Henry Perea. The Central Valley, the home of high-speed rail, not only for California, but right now for the entire United States. So welcome and welcome to this meeting. Before we start it, we'd like to say our hearts go out to those affected by the devastating fires in Southern California. California High-Speed Rail Authority stands in solidarity with the communities impacted, and we extend our deepest gratitude to the brave firefighters, first responders, and volunteers working tirelessly to protect lives and property. The governor's office has posted numerous links to resources for Californians to go to. We also have posted those to our social media accounts for information and resources, local, state, and federal government. Thank you. I'd like to ask my fellow Fresnan to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So before we start today's agenda, we begin each of our meetings with giving you an opportunity to address the board. Those who are present here and those who are watching or listening from around the state. So if I can ask the board secretary to explain to those of you here and those of you listening or watching how you can make comments to the board at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Before we begin public comment for the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors meeting, I would like to review some important information. For members of the public who have joined us in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called on in the order we received your card. If you are joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use your hand feature located at the bottom of the app. If you are dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into the queue. Speakers will be called on in the order their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call on the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your first and last name, and if applicable, please state the organization you are representing. Mr. Chair, we have no public comment this time.
No comments? Well, we're here alone, folks. All right, well, thank you. We'll now move into today's agenda. Item number 1 is the consideration and approval of our November 7th board meeting minutes.
Chair Richards, it looks like we might have some comments.
We do have comments? Oh, okay.
We have David Schwagel up first.
Good morning, Mr. Schwegel.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear.
Great. All right, David Schwegel with two items. First, the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association is holding a conference May 13th through 15th at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center in Washington, D.C., with around 500 delegates. Days 1 and 2 will be educational sessions. Day 3 will be meetings on Capitol Hill. I see that your CEO is among the confirmed speakers. Second, despite my severe case of bipolar depression, I continue to make progress on my book, High-Speed Trains, Bringing People Together. My book provides historical and futuristic perspectives on HSR projects worldwide. My book also examines the continent of North America beyond the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association's vision map. Calgary to Edmonton shows considerable promise as both cities have reached the 1.5 million population mark. Mexico also shows considerable promise from border crossings to within the country itself. Though not on their vision map, San Antonio to Monterrey came up in a recent U.S. High-Speed Rail Association newsletter. Although only 32 miles apart, San Diego to Tijuana is a strong high-speed rail market, as it can take upwards of 4 hours to cross the world's busiest land border crossing. Not a favorable community experience to the numerous Tijuana residents who work in San Diego. Tijuana to the world-renowned vacation destination of Cabo San Lucas also has promise, as does Tijuana to Monterrey, Tijuana to Mexico City, and Monterrey to Mexico City. Mexico gets glossed over by high-speed rail planners because the destinations are typically further than 600 miles apart. However, Mexico offers large population centers, with Greater Mexico City coming in at 22.5 million people. I plan to send my book on to the publisher in March, provided that there are no further delays for my bipolar depression. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwegel.
I've corrected my mistake here, so I can see 3 in the queue. Next up is David Quintero,
Mr. Quintero,
Frank Quintero.
Frank. Good morning, Mr. Quintero, and welcome from Merced.
Good morning, Chair Richards and board members. Frank Quintero, Deputy City Manager. Just a brief update. We are enjoying working with the consultants on the M2M utilities and looking over what needs to be changed and what needs to be improved to accommodate high-speed rail. Another group is looking at utilities at the station area, and we are enjoying working with them, and they are hearing what we are needing and the adjustments that need to be made. We're also working with the land use group, taking a look at station area planning, and we appreciate their encouragement on higher density, transit-oriented development, and we look forward to incorporating these type of land uses as we update our general plan and conduct our downtown high-speed rail station planning session. In addition to that, we've also received appraisals for our 2 facilities, and we are greatly touched that our state legislators are working with us along side by side with high-speed rail concerning the tenants in the building and trying to find a solution that works for everyone. So number 1, a great thanks to high-speed rail and their consultants. And number 2, we look forward to working and establishing our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quintero.
Next up, Rob Davidoff.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much for taking my comment. I had a question about the canal relocation in CP4, I think it's Kern County Water Storage District, Canal 922, just north of Wasco. It is, as far as I'm aware, the only incomplete portion of right-of-way in all of CP4. But as far as I saw in the most recent updates, there are currently 0 workers on CP4 and it's being considered complete. I was curious, I don't think that there's been much progress on that canal that I've seen in satellite and amateur drone video in the last 18 to 24 months. And I was curious if and when work on that to complete it was scheduled.
Thank you. If you'll forward your contact information to us, we'll have somebody from the staff respond for you.
Next up, Marvin Norman.
Yes, hello, good morning. Chair Richards
good
and,
morning.
can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Good morning again, Marvin Norman. I am San Bernardino resident and calling to of course admire the project and glad to see it continuing. I recently saw the governor's what well, the governor showed up and you guys were laying some rails, and so it's good to see that, especially given the current time and people saying that, hey, you spent $130 billion and don't even have rails. At least we have rails now, right? If only we had actually had the 130 billion that they claim we had. Anyway, it's good to see, and I you know, as someone who looks forward to riding the train one day, good to see that the project continues, and I know it's good to see that the rail is going down, and so with that, moving to the next phase of the project, hopefully we're working on getting some sort of trains that run on there at some point sooner rather than later, just to show them that, hey, look, we have a train on there, even though, you know, it's not, we haven't ordered a train set yet. It'd be good to see at least a train running so that we get people saying, hey, the train actually can run on there and it can exist. And on the vein of that, it would be great. You know, I'm a big train enthusiast and I'm a big steam train enthusiast. So I know there's a couple steam trains around the state, and obviously this isn't, high-speed rail isn't going to be run by steam trains as much as some people might think that would work, but it'd be good to see if maybe we could get a chance for one of them to go out and get a high-speed run in before you start running real full service. So there's something to think about just to show off to the public that, hey, look, we this is the old tech, this is the old, and it's ushering in the new, and let's let them run off and just show it off to everyone, and especially certain people
Second.
in government. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have no other attendees that would like to, oh, excuse me, spoke too soon. Next speaker, Roland.
Good morning, Mr. LeBon. Good morning. Alice, well, let's move on.
Yeah, he's the only one left on the docket. Mr. LeBron, can you hear us? The hand has been lowered. Okay, at this time, then we have no others that would wish to make public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank all those of you who chose to address the board this morning. Moving on to item number 1, as I mentioned a few moments ago, is the consideration of the minutes for November the 7th of 24. Is there a motion for approval? Second.
Second.
Motion and second, please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho, Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti,
Yes.
Director Scutia, Director Williams.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is our audit charter update report and our internal audit manager, Paula Rivera. Good morning, Paula.
Can you hear me?
Not very well. Is your mic on or extend? Get a little closer to it. For a second.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, there.
You
Okay.
can stand and be closer.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Richards and board members. I'm Paula Rivera, Chief Auditor with the authority. It's been a big year in internal auditing in the government arena. Both sets of audit standards that we follow were revised. The Institute of Internal Auditors revised and renamed their standards the Global Internal Audit Standards, and the revisions were effective January 9th, 2025. These standards are also known as the Red Book. The Government Accountability Office updated the Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, which are known as the Yellow Book. These updates are effective in December. Both sets of revisions include a focus on the system of quality management within the audit office. We are revising our strategic plan, our audit manual, and our audit charter. I bring for your approval today our revised audit charter. The audit charter incorporates the revisions to both sets of standards. However, they are primarily from the global internal audit standards. The Institute of Internal Auditors developed a model charter and guidance for customizing the model for public sector use. We've included our mandate, authorized function, responsibilities, and scope and types of audits from our existing charter. We created a marked up version for your information that I provided with your board materials this morning. The charter was almost completely rewritten by using the model charter provided. However, the substance and details specific to the authority are substantially the same. The model charter includes a few elements that are existing standards but new to the charter. Like we periodically report our conformance to audit standards based on our annual quality assurance and improvement program. A new element to the charter is the board oversight section. On the fourth page, I apologize that the charter didn't have page numbers on the draft document. But many of the elements within the board oversight section were in the previous standards, but the revision to the standards and the inclusion in the charter identify these elements as within board oversight. Are there any questions I can answer?
Any questions
I
for
have one
Mr.
question, Paul. Thank you for this. This is on my page 9, the marked up, having to do with the external assessments
Yes.
occurring at least once every 3 years.
Mhm.
Is this new? Or
No.
do we have that already?
We have this already.
Okay.
Any other questions? Colleagues, this is an action item. Is there a motion for approval? Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Director Schenk. That she indicated yes. Chair Richards.
Yes.
Director Camacho.
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller.
Yes.
Director Perea.
Yes.
Director Gilmetti.
Yes.
Director Scutia. Director Williams.
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paula. Agenda item number 3 is the CEO performance metrics criteria.
I guess this is the time. Yeah, we'll get coffee.
Yeah, read your message to us.
Yes, I'll. Okay.
This one. You have to look at another.
Colleagues, in order to produce this document, I formed a small committee of Director Williams and myself, who came up with the criteria that was before you in your board package. You'll see it's primarily management plan, project and construction change orders, streamline and vision, and financing alternatives. For the purposes of the public who may not be looking at the document itself, I'll briefly go over it. For those who may or may not know, the board does have the authority to set standards in the first 2 years of the tenure of a new CEO. And those standards are to help with recruitment, not the standards, but the payment is to help with recruitment. The standards are what's expected in order to earn the payment. So the law provides that the CEO can earn an additional $25,000 bonus at the end of its first year of service. And again, at the end of the second year of service, with new criteria being developed for what needed to be accomplished in the second year. In the first year, those items that Director Williams and I discussed and incorporated in these requirements for performance under the management plan would be to revise the organization chart to identify authority positions required to advance program development, construction, and train operation of Phase 1 of the California's high-speed rail system. The audit and risk are our audit and risk are direct reports to the board of directors with functional responsibility to the CEO. And 3, successful recruitment and placement of qualified candidates to fill first-tier positions to include risk management. For those positions requiring governor's appointments, successful recruitment and placement are, as referenced above, shall be achieved upon sending those proposed appointees names to the governor's office. Item number 2 is project and construction change orders. Reduce the costs of both pending and anticipated change orders relating to construction packages 1, 2, 3, and 4 as of August 1 of 2024 and before Ian Chaudhry's employment start date. The same as above applies to track and systems costs for the first 119 miles. Item number 3 is to streamline and vision. Both streamline and provide a new vision for connecting high-speed rail to California's north and south population centers, reducing costs and schedules in comparison to what has been depicted in the 2024 business plan. Item number 4, financing alternatives. The CEO will research additional sources of financing California's high-speed rail project and report findings to the board of directors. Those are the metrics from which the board can act or can consider and then act next September. His date of employment was September 16th of 2024. So that's what's before the board today. You are obviously invited to provide any discussion or comments with regards to the metrics.
May I?
Yes, please.
I just want to thank the subcommittee. I know that there was a lot of work done, Anthony and Tom and whoever else, staff that was involved. And I'm assuming that you've shared this outline with Ian to talk
Yes.
about, and he understands.
Yes.
So I would like to move the item and thank you all for all the effort that this took. I appreciate it.
And you're moving the item?
I am moving the item.
Okay.
second.
Okay, we have a motion
Chair-
and second. We have a motion. and
Chair,
three-
Chair Richards.
Yes,
Yeah, I just wanted to add, also my thanks to you, for, involving me, but also including the perspective. I just want to acknowledge also, that, the discussion that we had flows from work that was done by the management committee that you appointed previously to begin looking at, the position of the chief executive officer, and what will be needed to, ensure that we have oversight and accountability. And it's an important role of the board. So, with acknowledgement from, of Director Cohen and others who worked on that. This is as everyone knows, this is a continuing and annual exercise. And we'll continue to innovate on this. And as we move forward with the project and align the goals of the project ultimately, the success of the project with the expectations of our chief executive officer, we'll continue to review and innovate what are, what's needed to ensure those things are aligned. So I want to thank you again, Chair Richards, for your leadership on this as well.
thank you, and to you also. So at any rate, any further comments or discussion? We have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti,
Yes.
Director Scutia, Director Williams.
Aye.
The motion carried.
Thank you. Can somebody drag the CEO back out here? We would, but we can't find him. Oh, there he is. Item number 4 this morning is the economic impact analysis for high-speed rail investments. This is an annual report. Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Chair Richards and board members. My name is Derek Boughton. I'm the Authorities Reporting and Economics Branch Chief in the Financial Office. So I'm here today to go over the 2024 economic impact analysis. As you guys are aware, we update this report every fiscal year, going all the way back to 2006 data-wise. So this report is for the 23-24 fiscal year. Next slide, please. One more. Okay, so we have 3 major economic indicators that we go over. Job years, which are the equivalent of 1 year, employment in particular industry supported by the project. These include full-time and part-time employees as observed in the industry. For example, 1 employee working 5 years equals 5 job years. 5 employees working for 1 year also equals 5 job years. Next, we have labor income, which includes all forms of employment, income, including compensation, wages, benefits, payroll taxes that firms pay to employees, and income earned by self-employed workers or unincorporated sole proprietorships. And the major one is the economic output, which is essentially our GDP contribution from this project. It's an estimate of the overall value of the economic activity taking place as a result of the high-speed rail expenditures or investments. So a dollar invested in HSR sparks several activities in addition to labor income, such as the purchase of goods and services and value created from these activities. Next slide. So we capture the ripples of our investment in the economy. So we have our direct effects, indirect effects, and induced effects. And again, that's kind of the ripples of how our dollars flow through the economy and contribute to the GDP and as well as jobs. And we do this through an economic impact modeling software called Implant. So it's an industry standard. Next slide. So for this report, we've evaluated $13 billion of investment that the authority has made to this project through June of 2024. Next slide. So we are now at 108,700 jobs supported for this project as of June 2024. Again, that's a very large number. We were the highest job supported in our history last year in 2023-24. Obviously, because we invested quite a bit in the Central Valley and throughout the state. So last year alone, we had 16,600 job years that we supported. Next slide. Conversely, we also are up to $8.3 billion in labor income with 1.3 billion from last year alone. Next slide. And then for economic output, we're up to 21.8 billion from July of 2006 to June of 2024, with last year alone being $3.4 billion. Next slide. One of the important things that we do from this report is to calculate the distributions of the investments where they are occurring throughout the state. So obviously, Central Valley, where we're at today, has the most investment that we've occurred so far, because that's where the construction is. That's where most of the contracts are. So to date, we have, I'll keep that page. We've invested over $9.6 billion for economic output for just the Central Valley alone, with support of over 1,800 job years, or sorry, 1.8 thousand, sorry, 10,000 job years. It's hard to see that data from here. And again, and that's just for the Central Valley, right? We also have major impacts in Los Angeles area, Southern California, Sacramento, where we're headquartered, the Bay Area, and also the rest of the state. But again, we attribute these investments based on where the dollars are flowing through the contracts and through where the employees are at. So it's a good snapshot of where these effects are going throughout the state.
Can you just quickly explain to the people in the public and those here and around the state, what can you define a job year for everybody?
Yeah, so a job year was popularized through the Obama administration. And essentially it captures jobs over a time period or impacts over a time period. Otherwise, for projects like this, like, you could have a snapshot in time of, say, 10,000 jobs created, which is a great number. But if this project lasts, 10, 20, 30 years, that 10,000 doesn't represent the actual impacts of those jobs, right? So it's, I've been on this project for 12 years, so I count for essentially for 12 job years. So it's a great measure of the impacts of these large, lengthy infrastructure projects.
Thank you.
Next slide. The second half of the report is our estimates of future impacts based on the total costs by the project segments. So this will be very similar to last year's report, in that the only updated on cost right now is Bakersfield to Palmdale based on the EIR, EIS updates. So for the Central Valley, we estimate 330,000 job years upon project completion, with almost $70 billion in economic output. Next slide. For the Northern California sections, 247,000 job years estimated, with over $53 billion of economic output. Next slide. And then for Southern California, estimated 458,000 job years supported, with 900, almost 100 billion, of economic output we anticipate or calculate. And then next slide. So overall, we're estimating over 1 million jobs supported for this project upon completion, which is obviously a massive number. And it's the first time we've reached that or calculated that threshold. So it's definitely a great indicator and positive message, as well as $221 billion of economic output to the state of California. Next slide. So that's essentially the report today. Again, the benefits of our investment in California continue to ripple throughout the economy. We support tens of thousands of jobs across all functions, from planning and environmental clearance to engineering and construction. And over half of the project's investment occurred in designated disadvantaged communities. And the authority further supports equity through job training program. And also in the Central Valley alone, where we're at today, over $9.6 billion again in economic activity has benefited this region and its workers.
Thank you, Mr. Boughton. Any questions or comments for Mr. Boughton? Okay, this is an information item. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 5 this morning is the annual update of small business and conflict of interest compliance. Southern, good morning.
Good morning. I don't have any problems with the microphone, so I'll stand back. Good morning, Chair Richards and board members. I'm Katrina Blair, and I oversee the Small Business Development and Compliance Program. I'll be providing an informational update in response to the board's October 2022 resolution, which directed the authority to report annually on ACOM Floor's conflict of interest compliance, as well as the small business compliance. I'll briefly cover the small business portion and then turn it over to Attorney Tanya Southern, who will cover the conflict of interest portion of the presentation. Next slide. The small business team works with ACOM Floor and other authority primes to ensure that small businesses, disabled veteran businesses, and disadvantaged business enterprises are given every opportunity to participate on this project. We accomplish this by monitoring compliance from contract award to contract closeout. The small business compliance team begins every contract with a kickoff meeting where we discuss goals, expectations, and compliance requirements. At the start of the PDS contract, our team held a kickoff meeting with ACOM Floor, and we had an opportunity to meet with their leadership, their small business officer who has a robust background in small business DBBE and DBE compliance, which is extremely helpful. Furthermore, ACOM Floor must comply with the Small and Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program that was approved in 2012, which established a 30% overall small business goal, which includes DBE and DBBE, which 10% DBE and 3% DBBE. The PDS contract is not subject to the new small business DBBE and DBE goal structure approved by the board November 2nd, 2023, which has a standalone goal requirement that are subject to state and federal regulations. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. I was a little bit behind. There we go. Payment and utilization are the two areas where small business compliance directs their focus. So for monitoring payments, we are doing a few things. Currently, we use a compliance management system. The system tracks prime payments and notifies subcontractors and subconsultants, giving them the opportunity to validate payments they receive from the prime. The system keeps us compliant with the Prompt Payment Act and is designed to alert the authority if a payment has not been validated so that we can take immediate action, in which case the team contacts the small business directly and we confirm payment and we reach out to the prime directly to resolve the issue if we need to. Additionally, ACOM Floor and other authority primes must submit monthly compliance forms and detail payments made to small businesses, DBBEs, and DBE firms. And as an added measure of transparency, we also post contract payment reports on the authority's homepage and also our small business webpage. The second area where we focus is utilization. ACOM Floor's small business officer has a standing meeting with myself and the authority's small business advocate to discuss compliance and the efforts ACOM Floor is making to achieve their small business DBBE and DBE goals. In this meeting, we discuss strategy, risk, and ways to mitigate those risks. ACOM Floor also provides a monthly narrative that details outreach efforts and strategies to increase participation and the ways in which they keep their small businesses informed and educated about internal practices, such as proper submittal of invoices for timely payments. Next slide. Okay, so this slide details the September 2023 reporting period, and this is what I reported on in December 2023. The top row indicates the overall 30% goal that's based on total expended values. The second row details the DBE totals, and the third row indicates the DBBE totals. So last year we had to do some serious work with ACOM Floor to increase their DBBE numbers, and we'll discuss some of those efforts on the next slide. So this slide details the October 2024 reporting period. The top row shows that ACOM Floor is on target with their overall goal based on their total expended values. The small business team is working with ACOM Floor small business officer to assist still with increasing the DBBE numbers. We show an increase from last year, and considering that they're at the halfway point, we usually like to see them close to about 50% of their goal. In our regular meetings, they have discussed their plan for how they will use DBBEs to achieve their goals, and some of their efforts do include facilitation of weekly resourcing meetings to discuss opportunities open to small firms. They host monthly conference calls with PDS small business firms to share updates on the project, and also quarterly trainings and supportive services with PDS small firms. So we also provide ACOM Floor with an outreach platform where we partner together for workshops that detail how to do business with ACOM Floor. During the workshops, they discuss open positions where they have needs for small business DBE and DBBE firms. In addition, the ACOM Floor small business officer does attend our regularly authority hosted business advisory council meetings. And they've also presented to our members. and they report on their goals and their efforts to meet those goals. Our BAC is comprised of leaders from about 25 organizations and small businesses who represent the interests of small business DBE and DBBE firms. More recently, ACOM Floor's Small Business Officer participated in the authority's annual Small Business and Diversity Resources Fair that we held at UC Merced in October, where they hosted an exhibit table and held several matchmaking sessions with interested businesses. So these last 2 years have been a successful partnership with ACOM Floor, and we plan to continue to monitor their efforts to increase participation. And this concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions before I turn it over to Tanya.
Any questions? Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
That's probably one of the best reports that I've seen in a long time, and it's very thorough. But I do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
We have a compliance management system. What are we doing when, in fact, we find a contractor out of compliance? And what are the steps that you do to bring them back into compliance?
That's a good question. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of firms that don't comply. We only have a couple. Usually it's delays in their reporting. But if they are not complying, meaning they're not meeting their small business numbers, we do have a process. We start with a non-conformance report, and we'll send it to them and give them a certain amount of time to resolve whatever issue that they're having with bringing their utilization up. We do have what's called a document that's called Efforts to Achieve Participation. So we make sure that they're following the steps on that document, that guidance document. If they happen to be just, out of compliance and they just won't turn things around, we have to escalate and we talk to the contract manager, the leadership within the Primes organization. And we try to resolve the issue that way. And in some cases, the contract manager can stop work until they're compliant.
The DVBE goal, or what we're doing now, is, as I look at your report, it's about 1% participation. What is it that we are doing to do the outreach to those veteran-owned companies?
So usually what they do is whenever there's positions that come up, they look to the DVBE firms first to fill those positions. So we have about 9 DVBE firms right now in varying capacities and varying types of work. Usually the issue is a firm will have only a few resources, DVBE firms. And if at the time that position is available, they don't have the necessary resources, maybe they're on another project, then sometimes it can get a little tricky. So our small business officers working with those firms to make sure that they have a robust resource, list or access to resources to make sure that when jobs are open, we can look to those DVBE firms first to fill those positions.
Yeah.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you again. I compliment you on your report.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Director Schenk.
yeah, thank you. Katrina, we talked about this during the individual board briefings, but I'm sure members of the public have a similar question, and that is the edicts and attitude now coming from Washington and the new administration. What concerns do we have about how this might impact our disadvantaged programs?
So right now we're following the guidance from the US DOT. And right now we haven't gotten anything that says that the DBE program is not still intact. Thankfully, the state of California has laws in place that protect our small businesses and our disadvantaged business enterprise firms. And then, of course, we work with our attorneys to make sure that our contract language is sufficient and it protects us and it protects our firms. So until we get the word from our federal government that we have no DBE program, we'll keep moving forward.
And you had mentioned something that we're differentiated from some of the other programs because we don't have it as race-based.
Yes, yes. So our program is not based on race. So we do have our disadvantaged business enterprise program that is based on social and economic status. So any firm can apply, and we don't look at race in terms of applying goals to our contracts.
Thank you. Yes. Director Skusha.
Thank you, Katrina.
Mhm.
I call your attention to the slide on page 5. And I'm very interested to compare the numbers on page 5 to the numbers on page 6. And I noticed that the actual value on page 5 of the overall SD goal, the actual value today was 10 million. That's for 2023. But for 2024, the actual value is 41 million.
Mhm.
And it seems that the slides also indicate that the goal progress, the percentage goal, for 2023, the percentage goal was 33.1%. But for 2024, the percentage goal was 32.5, a slight decrease, but yet the actual value increased by $30 million.
Mhm.
So what's the reason for that increase of $30 million?
So there's various reasons for the increase in the money and showing the differentiation in the goals. Sometimes it's the difference in the work plans. Sometimes we'll have a work plan that did not use all of the money that they were intended to use, and so that money is not always transferred over. Sometimes there might be an increase, but they won't. What I've been told by our small business officer is that once they want to just stay on target with the 30% goal. So if there's any additional work, they want to keep that work and move it where there's deficiencies in the goal. So right now, when you see that increase, and I'm gonna have to come, I'm gonna have to come back to you on that because we did discuss it. And I don't have a complete answer, but when you see the increase, they really want to reserve as much work as they can for DVBEs. And if there is no work for DVBEs at that moment, then we have to wait for that work to come. But as far as that difference in that increase, I'll have to check into that and get back to you guys.
Because intuitively, it doesn't make sense to me.
And looking at the numbers, I don't have an answer right off the top of my head as to why that there's a difference. I just know that there's differences in the work plans and there's differences in the way that the money is designated in between work plans.
So then basically, when you say that there's differences in the work plan,
Mhm.
is there a difference in terms of methodology from 2023 as compared to 2024?
No, the methodology is still the same. The methodology is still the same. I'm not entirely privy to how things move around within the PDS. So my focus is just making sure that they're hitting their goals. So when they have large amounts of money, that changes the nature of the denominator. Then as long as they're hitting their targets.
It still doesn't make sense to me, Mr. Chairman. I'm just hoping that we are comparing apples to apples. Not apples to apples.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is like it also depends on the contracted amount of work that year.
Mhm.
And that's where the percentages move. The amount could increase and the percent could be a little lower. It depends on how much work has been contracted that year. So that is the reflection that I see there.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chowdhury. Thank you. And thank you for that challenging question, because now I'll bet you next year I'll have the answer to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you go, Katrina, I
Yes.
just want to thank you because I do remember about 2 years ago, we were having a lot of issues dealing with small business payments delays. And for
Mhm.
them, that is a very difficult situation
Yes.
because of the ability to carry debt, which they don't have a very great ability to do that.
Mhm.
So I know that we talked a lot. I know that I've attended a couple of the small business meetings
Mhm.
to rectify that. And you've done a great job in the last couple of years because we've not
you.
seen the kind of complaints come to this board that we were seeing. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Great report.
Mr. Chair, just one quick comment.
Yes.
That's all right. Yeah, again, I was on that same point. I think I was tracking in terms of 23 to 24 comparison. And thank you, Mr. Chaudhry, for explaining that. And what I want to say to compliment the team and everyone is that, just looking at these numbers and, I agree with Director Gilmetti that we've got to do more with respect to our veterans. Because as these numbers have grown and the spending has increased, it's a positive indication when we see some of the utilization of small businesses continue to go up. From 2023 at 18.3%, for example, for disabled. I'm sorry, for disabled. What's wrong with not disabled? Disadvantaged business enterprises to 20.5% with a significant increase in spending. And I also just want to compliment the team and others involved that these percentages, particularly as it relates to DBEs, that 10% goal is not a ceiling. Often those goals are set almost as a ceiling, like, okay, we reached it. We don't have to continue working harder. So it's encouraging to see that though we had previously exceeded, we continue to exceed those goals. So hats off to all of you for the good work.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Katrina. Good morning to the Board of Directors, our CEO and staff. My name is Tanya Southern, and this is my second report to the board on PDS, so I'm an old hat now. I wanted to update you that the contract, the PDS contract was negotiated and first approved in October of 2022. And we had a lot of discussion about conflict of interest compliance and some additional work in that regard. So the board has required additional conflict of interest reporting. The contract was executed in November of 2022, and we have 2 layers instead of 1 layer of conflict reporting. The first, the requirement is for our organizational conflict of interest requirements that is present in every authority contract. The second is a requirement that we initiated for this contract that is requires a conflict mitigation plan, and it identifies potential conflict of interest areas and measures to be put in place in order to avoid actual conflicts throughout the entire duration of the contract. Our first board update was in December of 2023, as Katrina alluded to, and we continue to be diligent in this area regarding conflicts of interest related to the PDS contract work. The plan requires quarterly reporting, so we get an update. And then there's also a reporting requirement that calls for supplemental reports. And those would be specific reporting as any conflict of interest, potential or actual, arises. So to date, since the execution of the plan, we have 9 supplemental reports in total that regards potential conflicts regarding staff, or potential conflicts related to other projects that are related to our project. The conflict mitigation plan requires identification of key personnel and additional expertise resources, and where necessary, mitigation measures are required and have been implemented. AECOM Floor continues to update this information and track all personnel changes. And to date, mitigation measures that we have enacted have avoided actually having to conflict out any individual from being staff on the PDS workforce. Plan requires reporting the relationships of each of the consultant members, and AECOM's principal in charge and Floor's deputy pick have all works diligently to ensure they are tracking key personnel and additional expertise reporting, and they are the first line of project responsibility. And then there are additional staff as well as AECOM Floor attorneys that assist in this regard. The plan also requires identification of methods to prevent, restrict, and disassociate consultant staff from other projects outside of the authority program that may be created. That can be something where maybe a staff that we want to onboard is currently working on a project where Flatiron is one of the joint venture on the project and would also be on the other. So we ensure that we have mitigation measures in place, and I can talk about that more if you're interested. It's also in our board memo. AECom Floor also conducts an internal review related to project involvement and potential PDS staff. And since our last board update, we have 4 of the 9 that I talked about for this last year, supplemental reports that were provided by the joint venture for the PDS contract. 2 were related to employees who worked on projects that our design builder entities worked on, and 2 were related to projects that will also relate to the authority. The ones mentioned in the memo are Transbay and Link US. And those all required mitigation measures to avoid actual conflicts. And some of the facts could change, so the obligation to report will continue despite if we have a supplemental report. Next slide, but did you already move it to the next slide? So this would, oh yes. Yes. No, PDS employees, staff members, sorry. No problem. All right, that's the right site, thank you. The plan also requires a description of how the PDS will control the information relative to the authority's operations and strategy. AECom Floor continue to implement security controls and a tracking system to identify user access to PDS-related information. And they have also been utilizing project-specific servers and separate cloud environments. The process implemented to promote awareness and instruct staff in the importance of impartiality and in its role preventing bias, fraud, waste, and abuse, including ethics training. AECom and Floor both continue to take steps to ensure that all onboarded staff are aware, PDS staff are aware of the plan and their obligations under it. And also the PDS has implemented a live web-based conflict of interest training specific to the project that each of the onboarded PDS members undertake. The consultant's process to assess the effectiveness of the conflict mitigation plan and address issues that arise is also a requirement under the plan. And the PDS has appointed attorneys for AECom and Floor as plan officers with direct responsibility for implementation of the plan and overall compliance. Next slide, please. Finally, we can report to the board that the authority and AECom are committed to ensuring that all potential and/or actual conflict of interest issues are immediately addressed as they are identified. And once identified, the authority and AECom Floor staff and attorneys continue to work collaboratively to implement mitigation measures that will sufficiently address conflict of interest issues that can be mitigated. To date, we have also agreed to mitigation measures for certain key personnel and additional expertise resources on the project, as well as related projects. We continue to take all conflict of interest issues and requirements seriously, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Question. Escutia.
Sorry. I'm doing the best I can.
Right. All right.
Take me to Spain with you.
This issue of conflict of interest is like bringing back bad memories. First of all, congratulations on the process in terms of holding PDS to this very robust conflict of interest mechanism. And I really do appreciate the fact that AECom and Floor have participated in this with collaboration and good faith. That's really, really very good. The thing that bothers me is that the process only applies to PDS. Does it apply, for example, to any future people that might be doing business with us? Will they have to comply with the same type of conflict of interest process?
So future PDS staff members?
No, I
No.
mean,
Oh.
anybody, I'm sure that we're gonna be letting out contracts sometime in the future, otherwise these people wouldn't be here. So, will future people seeking to do business with a high-speed rail have to also comply with this conflict of interest process? It's very robust, and I think it would be a shame if we only limit it to just PDS.
So presently, for all contracts, we have our organizational conflict of interest requirements and the policy, and that's one you know very well, as we revised it in the last couple of years. So everyone seeking to contract with the authority, if it's a procurement-based contract, like our big contracts, our A&E contracts, all of RFP-related contracts, there is a requirement for reporting in the procurement process. And we also request that if they have any worries, maybe they already have another contract with the authority and they're worried that if they get
So you're basically saying that our own high-speed rail conflict of interest process, is it similar or dissimilar to the one that AECom floor has to comply with?
So it is similar but related. So we do have a requirement. So your question is, do we have a requirement? We do.
Okay.
And I know the attorneys, especially during procurements, we do an independent investigation, not just what's disclosed during the process. And we also, through our chief counsel, we have a robust conflict of interest determination process that we ask all of the potential contract awardees to engage in.
I understand.
With regard to this extra layer, we can certainly, if that's the request, we can implement it into any contract. It's more the prolific larger contracts with the contractors or other types of consultants that have a larger presence in the state or other states that it would probably help with the most, which is why we implemented it in the PDS contract. We were dealing with AECom Technical Services and Floor Enterprises, who are great contractors and very, very prolific. So it would be an easy, we have a boilerplate. We ensure we comply with all law and anything new that comes out. It's something that we'd be happy to add if that's what you're asking, because we do think it's a very robust.
I think it's definitely a question worth reviewing when the time is proper for that. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I just wanted to congratulate you on the robustness of this conflict of interest process. By the way, this is my class on ethics training, so I should get credit for this. Because I was the one that pushed you guys on conflicts. Otherwise, it never would have happened.
You're right.
Right. I mean, let's just speak truth to power. Second question I have, which I also brought up during this discussion 2 years ago, and that is that whatever process that we make demands for contractors to follow, that we internally as a high-speed rail authority and our high-speed rail authority employees are also subject to the same type of, process. So the question that I have is, this conflict process is very robust, and I understand that because of large footprint of AECom and Fluor, they perhaps has to be more layers of conflict analysis. Do we put our employees through the same similar process? Because from what I understand, everybody around here in this industry, everybody seems to be working for certain contractors, and there's a in and out, coming out, in and out from one contractor to another one. And we have some of those employees that used to work for, say, a contractor, and they're working for us right now. Do we have a conflict of interest process to apply to that high-speed rail authority employee so that employee is not managing any part of these contracts of a former employer that she used to work for?
Yeah, there are individual conflict of interest requirements. So that's what you're talking about. So the organizational conflict of interest policy does not apply, but the FPPC and does require individual, it's part of ethics training that we all as state employees get. There are requirements that, if an authority staff member leaves, they are banned from work related to the authority. If they were a Form 700 filer, for example, that help make authority decisions, they are barred for a year period from doing that type
No,
of
I understand
work.
that.
Yeah.
I used to be a former legislator.
yeah,
I
okay.
know the revolving door. I
Okay.
understand. My question is, I just want to make sure that our employees who are managing these contracts don't have a conflict of interest. And by the way, I come from the perspective that many times a conflict cannot be eliminated, but at the very least, we should manage.
Yes, we do as part of, especially for the large contracts, the evaluation selection committee that is required by our board policies to evaluate. We do a conflict analysis twice. So the very first time is when they are tapped to be working on the contract, one of which is generally always going to be the contract manager. So the ESC, as I'll call it, is formed, and unless we don't have the contract manager for a big, large, maybe construction contract, the contract manager and heads and knowledgeable staff members are heads of the department are all part of that selection committee that is comprised of at least 5 authority employees or public employees. Then they file for that subject matter, I would say they have to file a conflict of interest form declaring if there's anything to disclose or not disclose. And the attorneys that help support the procurement all review that before they start working on it. Then once we have, if it's an RFP and proposals or an A&E RFQ and statement of qualifications, once we have a list of actual firms involved, then we do a second layer and we have all of the staff and ESC members file that form again based upon the entities and all of the subs. So, and then again, the attorney, the legal office reviews this and ensures that there isn't a conflict. And we've had many questions over time. You know, maybe a nephew works for a company that, you know, wasn't aware that would be bidding. However, the nephew didn't work on it and things like that. And the nephew isn't under the family where there'd be a conflict. So we do 2 layers there. And then we also, so again, the contract manager, I would say every time that I've worked on a procurement and I've been with Authority 9 years, the contract manager is one of those because we want them to be in the process and understand the contracts and be, you know, aware of all of these issues. Then the contracts themselves have a conflict of interest provision for the organizations, but then there's always an ongoing conflict requirement as an individual that you would have to comply working for the state. And we do take all of those seriously, and generally, if there's a question arises, maybe a family member has hired into a company and they're part of the entity that they're managing, we would look at all of those. I would say our staff is very diligent and understands we have ethics training. I want to say it's about every 2 years. So most people are very aware of all the requirements we have as a state employee.
Well, thank you, I think, for giving me peace of mind to ensure that our own employees are also subjected to very robust conflict provisions, and it seems that they are.
Yes.
So I congratulate you on that, Ms. Southern. Thank you so much, counsel. No more further questions.
Thank you.
Question time.
Yes, go ahead, Director.
Same question I asked Katrina. We have a monitoring process for compliance.
Yeah.
What do we do? What actions do we take if we find that they're out of
For conflicts?
yes?
Yes, for if they're out of compliance, well, we haven't had them be out of compliance yet. That doesn't mean that they couldn't. So one of the areas, and it discussed a little bit in the memo, one of the areas we're probably most concerned about an actual conflict arising is the NEPA process. As you know, we have the NEPA assignment. We have a NEPA team that will be working on those projects related to ours. So that's the area where we think they would be out of compliance, and thus far mitigation measures have been very strict where the teams are actually completely separate. They can't have any overlap. So we also have a continuing obligation for when it's the organizational conflict of interest. It's clear in that determination that they are provided with, but that they have a duty to update if the facts or other circumstances change. It's a small industry as well. Oftentimes we get information from outside, and that's happened a few times where the authority legal office headed by Alicia is aware of that, and we would engage in our own conflict determination and see if anything has changed. And for PDS, sometimes we engage two layers. We do the supplemental reporting under the conflict mitigation plan, but we also do reporting under the organizational conflict of interest plan. We're doing that with one right now regarding the Link US and some possible work for AECOM technical
I'd
services.
just like to remind our new CEO and you that when we awarded this contract, we also had a pot of dollars, which is $25 million, I believe, or either 20 or $25 million that we held aside, which is part of the $400 million contract that we awarded that day, as an award fee type of to help with compliance. So there is they do have skin in that game, and certainly the compliance issue is important to us. But just to help Mark, this is somewhat of an anomaly. That contract, we were about to award that contract, and the board became aware that there was either real conflicts or the appearance of conflicts, LAX and other areas. So that's the reason we brought this about. And because of that, the staff then formulated a plan, which then allowed for a mitigation plan, realizing they couldn't undo those outside contracts. But we then asked them, how are you going to mitigate it?
Yeah.
And then we have to accept the mitigation plan. And we thoroughly went through that and we're satisfied with the mitigation plan. But I just want for historical value, I thought I'd pass that to you.
I remember.
Okay, good. Good.
Remember?
Well, I can also let you know, I work in supporting contract management as well. You know, a lot of times if you worked on procurement, you know that contract very well and you help support. I've worked very closely with the contract manager, Darren Kishiyama, and we have had several conflict of interest issues, not related to specific individuals, but a lot of times entities want to work on more than one contract. PDS is a very program-wide contract. So if an entity wants to be on the PDS contract, but also work under the RECES, as we call the Rail Systems Engineering Services contract, or another contract, we have to take a close look. So the authority's legal office, spearheaded by Alicia, has issued multiple conflict of interest determination for, I could name probably 5 from the top of my head, but I won't bore you, with entities that are trying to work on multiple areas. And we have engaged mitigation measures to make sure that those teams won't be in a position where there's an actual conflict. The most, the most egregious one would be when they're in a position to prepare the work and be involved in work product, but then through the other contract, be in a position where they would oversee or approve. So that's the one issue that internally we often look at. And if someone says, oh, we'd like the PDS to do this or hire this firm, we have to ensure they're not already under another contract. RECES, I use that as an example because it's another very large contract that has a large program-wide footprint. So we always have to double check and make sure that we're not going to be having them in a position or where they're working on a procurement and then want to later bid. Sometimes that work, they'll help develop a scope of work and say, oh, but another part of their entity wants to bid on that. And, you know, the entity is conflicted out, not just the little teams or large teams, I should say.
Vice Chair Miller.
I think you've answered. I don't have a question. I just remember in terms of our enforcement, we can terminate the contract if we find a conflict that has not been discussed.
Yes.
Because our first line of defense was disclosure. They had to sign under penalty of perjury. We find out that there's a problem, there's termination, and then reimbursement back to us. So that's the final. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Blair. We'll now move on to item number 6, which is our CEO report. Mr. Chaudhry.
Sure. Few updates. The first one, which was on January 6th, we launched the construction of our railhead site that has been done in partnership with our Class 1 railroad BNSF. The significance of that when we had governor there is that by constructing those tracks coming up the freight lines into the railhead yard, that enables us to bring all our commodities and materials that we need to start laying high-speed tracks. At this point, we are looking at all these general commoditized items that includes rail ties, poles, ballast, all those things that we need to build tracks. Our strategy now is to bring those in. We are hoping to kick that off this year and then build the tracks, having a track builder contractor under contract by second quarter in 2026. So we can actually progress on laying tracks, getting the tracks this year and then laying tracks next year. But that was the event, which was very significant for us. And we were able to do that because of the completion of the contract package for civil works, substantially completed, with minor issues that we still have to get resolved on the north current that somebody mentioned before. That was a significant progress for us. On the other item for the Southwest high-speed rail network that we are collaborating with Brightline on the very southern side, and then interconnecting that through High Desert Corridor network to enable passengers, once the system is all fully interconnected and up and running, folks from San Francisco will be able to travel to Las Vegas and also to Los Angeles. So right now we are looking at this network to get interconnected through High Desert Corridor to the Brightline on one end. And then on the other end, we connect to Caltrain on the northern part. We are working with those entities very closely. We are collaborating on how we can take the benefit of standards and types of construction that we're going to be doing, especially with the High Desert Corridor. We are looking at how we can help them environmentally clear their corridor. And at the same time, also economy of scale, if we were to purchase items that we need, and if they're going to use the same type of material, we are also discussing with them what are the opportunities to optimize the cost for the taxpayers so that we can actually go ahead and help them as much as we can. That is more relevant to High Desert Corridor Agency. The next thing, we have a big event coming up, which is our industry forum. We have a dozen or more topics that we are covering at that event. That is ranging from the suppliers of raw materials, product suppliers, public-private partnership, public-public partnership. We are looking at that as well. That event is on January 30th and 31st for 2 days. We have seen significant interest of the business community to come attend that. We have roughly about 400 attendees that have registered already. And we are continuing to accommodate as many we can to provide them the opportunity to share their ideas and thoughts on a one-on-one basis. And so the team have been working very diligently on that. The purpose of doing this is to make sure that we get, as we move into the next phase of constructing tracks and building stations and getting it ready for commercial operations, we would like to get industry input on our strategies and approaches that we are sharing with them in a public forum, and then they can provide, whether they can provide this openly or in confidential manner as one-on-one information to us to what they think from their participation point of view, what can we do different or better. So that we will encourage anyone who's listening to this to, I think our registration is sort of closed, we are booked out, but we will reach out to our team, we will take exceptions if we have to, just let our team know. Those were the 3 updates we have for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. Any questions, comments?
No, that's a robust report. Alicia, as board members, we can attend this conference, correct?
That's correct.
And we encourage all the members to spend as much time on the 30th and the 31st up in Sacramento. Item number 7 is any other comments that board?
Director Williams, Director Williams has a comment.
Say again?
Director Williams has his hand up.
I was anticipating the next
Sure.
item. I did have a quick question. If
Sure,
I guess
go
it,
ahead.
So I apologize. I probably should have brought this up under public comment. First of all, I want to thank the staff for the materials that we received for this meeting. They were very timely, organized. And one thing that I noticed that maybe I didn't notice before is all of the public comments that come into us by email that are included in the binder. So with respect to that, I just wanted to ask, I don't need a response right now, but I just wanted to ask staff to connect with me offline for an update on the Merced Boys and Girls Club. I noticed again, just I always enjoy public participation in these processes, and the folks in that region, very strong local support. So I just wanted to get an update on that if we could.
Director Williams on. with regards to
Offline.
that.
Yep.
Offline?
Or
Okay.
or you can, sure.
All I
if
can tell
if
you
have-
is that we're working with as much as we can with the Boys and Girls Club. We're also working with the leaders in government in the city of Merced. The other thing I can say just with regards to it, regardless of what the end game will be on this, the solutions, we're not talking about anything that's imminent. It's at least, we used to think about 2 years. It's probably more than 2 years downstream right now. So I'm very hopeful we'll find solutions. And when I say we, it's the city of Merced, and certainly the authority will participate in whatever way it can with the restrictions we have on simply participating and handing out money. Any other comments? Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one question I was going to ask Ian with respect to the Central Valley update. We've been for the past year focused on the critical path for the third-party issues on CP1 to make sure that we meet our 2026 deadline. Who is in charge of that now? I understand the person that was there is no longer with us. I'll be able to give the name by tomorrow, okay, or the day after, but we have a new individual who's joining us. We had the approval for that yesterday. Great. Okay, thank you. Yep.
Any other comments from board members? Seeing none, then, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business of the board meeting for the January 23rd meeting today. We will start in 10 minutes. We will have the Finance and Audit Committee meeting for the same period as was reported here to you today. So again, anybody who would like to stay with us for a few minutes after that, we have F&A, Finance and Audit, starting in about 10 minutes. The Board of Directors meeting is adjourned.